Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome all back to a series that a lot of you guys probably thought I had discontinued. Back in January of this year, I recorded a video called Stage 1 Throughout the Years, where I went through a retrospective of the Stage 1 courses from AW 4 to AW 14 to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the Las Vegas Finals. You might also know that video went through a lot of trouble on the editing side of things and actually recording it as well, as it was a really long video. And among my longest, I think it might actually be my longest video I've ever made, especially full voice production, but it was a really long video. It was a very difficult video to make, but it was a video I ultimately enjoyed making and really wanted to do. And in that video, I mentioned how I would be doing a video on each one of the 4 stages and talking about their evolution, and I am still doing that. Today, we are doing Stage 2. I generally just want to establish some ground rules. As of recording this, AW 15 Stage 2 will definitely be out by the time this video releases. However, it has not released as of the time of making this video. As of the time of recording this video. Regardless of AW 15, this entire series will go on the basis of AW 14 being the most latest tournament. So even during the Stage 3 video, it won't talk about Season 15. Another thing is that Season 15 and 16 also have a racing format with Stage 2, so I think it would be really difficult to kind of talk about Stage 2 in that way. I think what I will likely do as a retrospective way to bookend this, I will talk about Season 15 and 16's courses in a separate on their own video as a kind of epilogue to this series. But genuinely, I might also not do that because it's not like I don't have Ninja Warrior podcast episodes that you guys can watch if you guys want to know my opinions on that set of obstacles along with a few friends as well. This series I wanted to keep more standard, so that's why this is only going to be from AW 4 to AW 14 and not including Season 15, even though by the time this comes out, definitely that must have aired by now, I would think. But this is just talking about Stage 2, and speaking of which, I'm going to have to establish this every time, but I am not talking about the first 3 seasons of A&W, where they filmed in Japan, for the simple fact that those aren't the Vegas finals, those were Sasuke finals, so they are a little bit different, and honestly I want to talk about them on American soil in terms of just the Vegas Natural Finals as a whole, so that's where we are going. I am going to be ranking each course from anywhere from S to E. Yes, I am definitely using a sonic waking system for this, as you guys might know, judging by some comments and some song choices I've used for montages. I am a pretty big Sonic fan, so I thought it would work the best here. Work the best as for this series, as you guys probably noticed in the last video. A Stage 1 course never got that bad for me to call it an E rank or for me to call it an S rank in the last video, but there are some choices here that I feel like I need to note, as we will be seeing those ranks actually be used this time around, as there are some pretty bad and some really good courses in this lineup. So, without any further ado, let's get into the very first Stage 1 course that was in Vegas in 2012, Season 4. Now Season 4's course was exactly the same as AW3's course, or Sasuke 27. This was because they had the blueprints from Sasuke, and they didn't bother to make any kind of sort of big changes. This goes for Stage 1 as well, as the only big change being the addition of the rolling log instead of the rolling S called go. However, here on Stage 2, the course is literally the same, aside from a few costly measures that way it could actually be built here. Stuff like the balance tank using different material, that kind of thing. But, since we don't talk about AW3 in this video, I might as well talk about it. So, let's talk about AW4's obstacle line. First thing, starting up was the slider drop. Basically, a bar on a track that has a drop where the bar can easily fall off the track or can jolt you if you're not ready for the drop, and then it dismounts to a path. This is a really simple obstacle, and in Season 3 and 4, some they just did fail on it, the most notable in AW4 being James McGrath. But other than that, it's a really simple obstacle, but I think it's like an okay way to start the stage. Next up is the common double salmon ladder. The double samurai was the ninja killer of this round, taking out more ninjas than any other obstacle on this course. This grabbed a lot of AW rookies, or even some AW veterans such as Evan Dollar, but generally speaking, it was the cutoff point from kind of just generic, but you're good enough to make it past stage 1 to this is more of the elite pack. The double samurai isn't really all that much of as an obstacle to talk about much. It's basically just a samurai with a transition to another set of rungs. The last S1 was actually higher than every other rung on the set, which will remain the case until AW5. After AW5, however, I'm pretty sure the producers just forgot to make this the case, as AW6 has it back to the norm, and has this last one being exactly the same. But yeah, the double samurai is fine. I don't see anything wrong with it. Now we got in the third obstacle spot, we have the unstable bridge. The unstable bridge is another obstacle to where it is a little bit cheaper compared to the Sasuke version, but it did make the dismount a lot harder. Generally speaking, most people who feel this obstacle, such as Drastic, for example, fell into dismount. As the wind often blew the bridge away from the pad, and it was difficult to even build up momentum in the first place. So, you can see the problem here. This obstacle was really difficult, and it was definitely second place on the knockout way, and it was very close to the double samurai item. Next up, we got the balance tank, where you got to walk on a barrel or to the other side where a rope is. This obstacle is definitely still difficult. And I think it should have stayed a lot longer, honestly, because I think its next position after this, the butterfly wall, is a little bit of an easier obstacle. But the balance tank is not a bad obstacle either. Honestly, I think the balance tank is actually pretty good and actually could be quite difficult. In this season, once they grabbed two notable veterans who did well last season, those being Travis Rose and Flip Rodriguez. Next up, we have the metal spin, which did also see a notable change from AW3. AW3, aka Sasuke 27, used the wheel chains on this metal spin, and while AW4 through 6 used more cheaper chains. They were generally more rope-like, meaning they were easy to grab onto. Despite this, only one ninja actually cleared this obstacle. Then we finally have the wall lift, an obstacle that I have literally no opinions of whatsoever. The wall lift has always been a time waster, even on Sasuke, as you can only time out on the obstacle. This would be common in AEW, as it wouldn't be till season freaking 13 that an obstacle would actually go here where you could actually fall on it and not just time out. But it's more common for Sasuke, and even Sasuke rarely has an obstacle that you could fall in the water as Stage 2's final obstacle. It is usually some kind of variation of the wall lift, and that's what it is here. The timer for this course was 105 seconds, or 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Definitely a difficult time limit. All of the ninjas aside, 2 out of the 3 ninjas who got to the balance tank were running out of time significantly by the time they got there. So this is definitely a tough crunch. Most notably, the only competitor to clear this course was Brent Stephenson, who cleared the course with technically .03 left on the clock. I say technically speaking because it is notable that this stage 2 actually, as Brent did actually time out here. However, the producers allowed him to move on to stage 3 as it was close enough, and they admitted to themselves that it probably would not have made for an entertaining finale. Because of this, they let Brent Stephenson move on and edit it together so that way it looked like he cleared with no obstacles whatsoever. This is why on Mount Doyama you can see Zero in the background, despite the fact that the show treats it as Brent absolutely clearing. But even Brent himself didn't know as everyone was coming out, as again it wasn't obvious. And it wasn't directly obvious. Aside from this though, after this, we had 2 fails on the metal spin, and everyone else was knocked out earlier in the course. This generally just seems like because the crowd going to stage 2 wasn't really all that much of a big notable crowd. Stephenson was definitely a notable veteran, but we also didn't have competitors such as David Campbell or even Ryan Stratus this time around, as both of them went out kind of early. Earlier in the season. The two of them made it Into the metal spin, Paul Casmi and Derek Nakamoto both had difficulty with it and couldn't grab onto the chain. This comes down to a stage 2 course with the lowest amount of finishers, with the only course in AEW history to only have one finisher into AEW 13 Stage 3. H3. Most of the time, until AEW 13's third stage, which I'll get to talking about sometime in this series. To give AEW 4 Awakening, I'd probably give it a B1, because I don't think it's really a bad course, but I also think it feels kind of uninspired, especially since it's all pretty much exactly the same as as Sasuke 27's course, which was exactly the same as Sasuke 26's course, or AEW 2 and 3. So, yeah, I don't have much more to say on this stage, but it's fine enough for what it is, and for its first outing in Vegas, it was definitely a deadly stage, too. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It just could be a little bit more difficult and more inspired, but for the first attempt, it was a good one. Moving on to AEW 5, the course definitely gets a lot worse here. There was only one obstacle change. Instead of the slider drop, we have the hang slider in the 5th obstacle position. This is probably the weirdest obstacle I've ever seen on AEW, and it was the easiest obstacle on AEW, probably tied with the laser beams as the easiest obstacle ever seen in Vegas. It just seemed this obstacle was meant to rotate competitors as they went down the track. The track went down very slowly, and as a result, the hang slider rotated very slowly. It wasn't really all that much of a difficult dismount, and if they really wanted this to be difficult, they could have just spun it like a helicopter or something. Aside from this, the course remained exactly the same with literally no changes from AEW 4. Because of this, I don't have much else to talk about with this stage. The time limit was up from 2 minutes and 10 seconds to 2 minutes and 30 seconds. There was basically no reason for this, and it just made it so there was enough. Instead, a lot of competitors had a lot of time to go by. So this equally just made for a worse Stage 2 course. This course had 7 Stage 2 finishers, including some notable veterans such as Travis Rosen and James McGrath. This course was definitely a downgrade from AEW 4, as the one change they did made the course worse, and then they upped the time limit, which technically might have been necessary, which technically was definitely necessary given the fact that most of AEW 4's competitors were rushing by the time they got to the metal spin. But honestly, until they got to the metal spin, and the only quail was only by a technical, and the only technical quail wasn't even a quail. So this was definitely needed to be up, but probably a little too much given the fact that there were no downs to the wire quails, and the slowest quail had Travis Rosen had 5 seconds left on the clock. AEW 5's course definitely gets a C rank from me. It still has everything good from AEW 4's course, but the hang slider and the higher time limits definitely lower it for me. Anyway, moving on to AEW 6. AEW 6 was the first season to get a major revamp in terms of Stage 2. The hang slider was changed out, as that obstacle kinda sucked, for the more superior Warp Jungle. Warp Jungle was a very difficult obstacle for many competitors. A lot of ninjas just weren't expecting it, and because of that, they often got lost in the trick. Famously, Brian Arnold. Arnold did something really weird this season where he purposely waited until 2 seconds left on the clock to hit the Stage 2 buzzer, so that way he had more time to run on being really cocky about finishing this course. Because of this, he saw almost no one try Rope Jungle, meaning he had no really idea of how to get through the obstacle, so he did it at a really slow pace. The obstacle didn't take out many people, but it was definitely a huge time waster, and definitely made the next 2 obstacles, the double samurai and the unstable bridge, a lot more difficult, and definitely made a lot more competitors fall there. These received no changes from the previous season, aside from the fact that there was no higher rung, unlike AEW's 4 and 5, because I just assumed the producers basically forgot about it when designing this course. To the next obstacle, we have a new one in the form of the butterfly wall. The butterfly wall is definitely an easier obstacle compared to the balancing, but I don't think it's really I don't think it's a bad obstacle because of that. obstacle because of that. It still was difficult, and it definitely wasted more time if you took another spin around on the butterfly wall. This obstacle grabbed didn't grab many people, but it was still a time waster. Now we got the metal spin, the obstacle that took out more than any other. This obstacle was particularly deadly on this last season it was on, as most ninjas ended up missing the landing pad. This was because the landing pad was not made parallel to the initial starting point, meaning that most competitors swung away from it, so they couldn't stop the momentum. This stopped many ninjas in their tracks, including veterans such as Andrew Lowe's, Chris Wojcicki, Travis Rosen, and rookie Ian Dory. While the only two ninjas to complete this version of the obstacle were Joe Molatsky and Elliot Hall, both competitors who use a technique by putting their foot underneath the landing pad. That way they can easily stop the momentum and keep on moving onto the wall. Speaking of the wall lift, it's exactly the same, so I don't have anything else to say on it. Just wanted to note it. The timing was exactly the same for the previous season too, but with this course it was definitely more of a crunch. With both Joe Molatsky and Elliot Hall still was not having all that much time after completing the metal spin. Like I said before, the metal spin was a pretty deadly obstacle this time around. Like I said before, being the ninja killer of the season. Not much else to know on this course, but again, unlike the previous season, there were only two finishers, making the situation very similar to AW4, where there weren't many ninjas moving on to stage 3. Regardless of that, this stage still gets a rank higher, still goes a lot higher than AW4 stage does. I think it just barely can be given an A-. I think it just barely scrapes over that barrel with some good obstacle changes here and there. However, this is a course that did not go above and beyond with its obstacle changes, particularly with the fact that the butterfly wall is technically worse than the balance tank. But honestly, I think it's fine. I think this course definitely went better than the last one, and again, it's the first A rank here. It's like a 90% kind of A rank, but I still think it's a good course, and again, the timing was pretty good for this course as well. Moving on to AW7's course, this is definitely a little more interesting to talk about. This was the last course before AW's big rebrand in AW8 due to Isaac Cordero and Jeff Britton's total victory in this season. This stage 2 would initially get no changes, as the first 4 obstacles were exactly the same from AW6. However, Wolf Jungle wasn't as deadly this season as most ninjas had gotten used to it, with the only exception. This season, a couple of ninjas did end up failing it, and it did end up stopping Brent Stephenson from making and it did end up tripping up Brent Stephenson, notably enough. The 5th obstacle would also be changed out, from the metal spin to the very controversial roulette row. Roulette row was initially seen as a very easy obstacle, as that's what it looks like. It was a modified version of the spin cycle seen in the Venice City qualifiers. However, this one was a lot more difficult. It was basically 2 giant hoops that you had to reach or jump in between, and you had and then make the dismount. All 3 jumps here were really difficult. The initial jump to the first hoop did take out 2 ninjas in the form of Carson Voiles and Brian Wojcicki. The move between the 2 loops took out the most people, as you really only had 1 chance to make this move. If you missed it, you likely were not going to be able to get the thing back moving. It was basically impossible. And similar to AW6, a lot of ninjas just hanged until the timer ran out. This included competitors such as Brian Arnold, Mike Bernardo, JJ Woods, and other notable competitors as well. There were basically 2 certain ways you could make the transition between the 2 hoops. You could reach in between them, or you could just jump between the 2. You definitely had to do this all in one move, but even if you made the second jump, it was never a given if you'd make the dismount. Famously, rookies Derek Nakamoto and Mike Miles both got to the dismount pad, but ended up falling off due to the angle you were dismounting off. Also on this list of competitors who failed at the dismount are Flip Rodriguez, who was also too hesitant to let go of the final hoop and ended up falling here. This was very shocking for Flip, as it looked like this was his year and it looked like he was going to clear this obstacle. This obstacle was definitely a big separator, as a lot of notable names fell here, and I've mentioned a good chunk of them. The 8 that made it past here all moved on to the wall lift, which was no different from the previous season, aside from some changes in the walls they used, which just seemed like a costly saving measure. It didn't really change the difficulty of the obstacle, and obviously no one timed out here. This led to 8 finishers on stage 2, but to be completely fair though, this was also the stage 2 with the most ninjas attempting it at the time, so it kind of evens out in this way. Either way, I really like this course. I think every obstacle on here shines at least somewhat, even if only somewhat. And with this being the final showing for a lot of obstacles on this course, particularly for a lot of obstacles on this course, it was definitely a good send-off for a good send-off for all of them. A send-off for all of them. This is going to be the first course I am giving an S rank to. This course was absolutely that good, and I will definitely be giving it its props here. AW8 saw a massive change in format. Saw a massive change in the course design due to the total victories I mentioned earlier in AW7. This is because this AWA was given a really difficult stage 2 revamp, which was for better and for worse. I will admit the season 7 course might have been seen as too easy, and it definitely needed a revamp after something like a total victory. However, my opinion of this course is definitely it's too hard, but you guys will probably see what I mean coming up here. The first obstacle on this course was the giant wing swing, which immediately sapped your upper body strength, for better or for worse. I don't really think this was a good obstacle to start the stage with. It immediately went into the fact that this course felt more upper body focused than stage 3, which is not what stage 2 was meant to do. I think this is something that AEW lost track of until AEW 13. Stage 2 was a speed course. Famously in Sasuke and in AW2, the time limit for this course was 1 minute and 13 seconds. That's how little time you had to complete this course. And it was definitely a time crunch too. Stage 2 was a one-shot run to the finish. And both Sasuke and AEW would eventually lose this as they kept on modifying and changing it. AW8 being the first example. This first obstacle would be very sluggish and very easy to fail. This would be very sluggish and immediately waste time. With this, you'd grab a ball, moving you on to the next obstacle, the down-up salmon ladder, which is definitely also way too slow for stage 2. I guess there's technically nothing wrong with this obstacle. You can definitely do a lot worse, but this is definitely the worst variations of the salmon ladder to me. It just took way too much time. Though to be fair though, it did fuck with a lot of ninjas, as a lot of them weren't used to going down on a salmon ladder. After this obstacle, we had the deadly Wave Runner. This obstacle taking out more ninjas than any other. The Wave Runner was famous in taking out top competitors such as Joe Muraski, Nicholas Coolidge, and even more surprisingly enough, Flip Rodriguez, who ended up failing the obstacle after not transitioning to the second board, as that wasn't allowed. This obstacle otherwise was still really difficult. Unlike the unstable bridge, the thing could easily rotate. So if you're not careful, it could easily rotate on you and you could fall really easily. Really easily. The transition was also really difficult, as when you're trying to let go, you could easily just pop off, as again, as you can easily, as attempting the transition could easily make you pop off, which happened to both Joe Molosky and later on Jesse Graff. After this, we had a modified version of the butterfly wall where a trampoline was added to it. This definitely made the obstacle a lot harder, but no one was taken out by it, aside from Megan Martin during the All-Stars competition, if you really want to count that. Next up, we had the other big ninja killer, on this stage. The double wedged. Oh boy. If I were to ever talk about city finals courses, I would bitch about the wedge for hours. I don't think it's a good obstacle. I don't think it's a good obstacle. The double wedge is a very infamous obstacle, more for the fact that it was very unpredictable. You think it's done one way, but it completely backfires on you, as moving the ball was surprisingly more complicated, and you can easily slip off too. The transition between the two balls was particularly difficult, as it took up guys such as Jake Murray and Josh Levin. If you made the transition, great. You're still kind of screwed. As again, you had to make at least a couple more jumps to get yourself closer to the landing pad, and you could easily feel the dismount, as many people did in LA earlier that season on the single wedge. Anybody who made it to this point in the stage was basically screwed, as this took out many ninjas. This obstacle would particularly become Brian Arnold's nemesis, as Brian Arnold would not only fail this during the regular season, he would also fail this during the USA vs. the World, and would later fall in the single wedge during the Denver finals. And it was the very next season. This was to the point where Brian Arnold famously said this during his Season 9 vignette.
The wedge takes me out again, I'm retiring.
Ironically, Brian Arnold would only compete for one more season where he was taken out early and barely even shown by the show. After the double wedge was the very simple wall flip, which really felt like changing for the sake of changing, as there was really nothing wrong with the wall lift, and this is equally just a worse obstacle. The timer for this stage was 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Yeah, this timer really just makes me want to throw up. It's way too fucking big for a stage 2 course. This is ultimately because of all the very long time-wasting obstacles on this course. It's not like the 3 minute 30-second time limit wasn't needed. In fact, both curves on this course were very down to the wire and very close. However, it just means that these obstacles definitely should not have all been on the same stage 2 course. If they were one of these, fine. But these obstacles take way too long, and because the time limit suffers. However, the time limit is the least of all worries, as this would end up getting worse in the next 2 seasons. As mentioned earlier, only 2 people ended up completing the wedge and moving on to stage 3, ultimately making this course one of the least successful in recent history. I think this is definitely justified given the fact that, again, there were 2 total victories this season, but ranking this stage 2 individually, it still makes for a very weak stage 2, and one that is definitely too hard. However, this isn't the last we would see as a too hard stage 2. AW8 Stage 2 definitely gets a swank for me. I don't think there's any bad obstacles on it. I just think everything meshed together. Makes for a very slow-paced and way too upper body focused course. A focused course. I think it's still entertaining to watch, and but honestly, the best obstacle here is the Wave Runner, and I'd call it really the only good obstacle here too. I give it a C-rank though, for the simple fact that it's still entertaining to watch, and generally speaking, it's still an okay enough course. I don't think it's terrible. I just think they had way too much fun making this course look difficult. Moving on, we got Season 9. This Stage 2 is an interesting situation. If you guys have seen any in the last episode, you might remember that I noted that Season 9 was my favorite season. So you might think that my favorite Stage 2 is from Season 9. Nope. This is not my favorite Stage 2. This is definitely still a good Stage 2, but it's definitely not my favorite. This Stage 2 doesn't have many changes from Season 8, but still has a couple. Starting with is the exact same course. Starting off, the giant wing sling returns from the previous season, with the only modification being the dismount. Well, instead of going onto a bar that would lead you to the down-up sailing ladder, it was just a simple pad. This dismount was difficult, as it would stall out some competitors. The second obstacle was the crisscross salmon ladder, my personal favorite variation of the salmon ladder. This salmon ladder is similar to the double salmon ladder, but has two entire transfers to different sides. This obstacle wasn't particularly difficult compared to other salmon ladders, but it was definitely a way speedier replacement compared to the down-up salmon ladder. I think this was the natural angle they should have went with after the double salmon ladder in AW7. As this was a speedy salmon ladder, and people were really able to hack and slash it if they really wanted to. Notably John Alexis Jr., where he completed the salmon ladder in 3 moves, including jumping backwards. There was also Sean Bryan, who decided to do the same thing. Aims to do the same thing that season. This obstacle was still pretty deadly, as it did take out notable veterans Nicholas Coolidge and Nate Hansen. And next up, we have the return of the Wave Runner. Aside from a color change on the boards, there's not really too much more to note here, as the obstacle is just as difficult as last season. However, it did grab less competitors. Then we got the Swing Surfer. Definitely an improvement over the butterfly wall and the balance tank from previous seasons. This obstacle was just a lot more difficult, as you had to do a complete leap of faith across a giant gap, and the landing pad was quite narrow. Then you had to jump to another rope to a side and climb up. This obstacle was definitely still difficult, and while it didn't take out many ninjas, the most notable of which being Ian Doy, it was still a difficult obstacle. Finally, we have the big ninja killer for this season. And one of my personal favorite obstacles, Wingnut Alley. This is probably also one of the most controversial obstacles, as a lot of people think this obstacle is way too hard for stage 2. I don't really think I agree with this one. I think this obstacle is so much fun to watch. This gauntlet of wing nuts just has a surprisingly biased place in my heart. I love seeing ninjas take this on. I love seeing some of the amazing moments on this obstacle, such as Jamie Wan's one-handed save. And the fact that so many ninjas got taken out here. A long list of veterans got taken out by this obstacle. And it is quite taken out by this obstacle, particularly by the dismount. The dismount would take out 5 ninjas, who definitely should have cleared the obstacle, but ended up failing due to how long this gauntlet is and losing the grip. This included Daniel Gill, Adam Whale, Flip Rodriguez, and Jamie Wan. This made ninjas very wary of this dismount, as only really Najee Richardson and Joe Molotsky had a clean landing going off this obstacle. The other guy to clear it, that person being Sean Bryan. Bryan just barely made the dismount, with him almost falling off the course. This not only came out to bite him, as in USA vs. the World, he hit his back really hard and went back into the water as of making the dismount. At the end, there's the standard wall flip, which isn't much of an obstacle, honestly. The time limit would end up being 240 seconds, or 4 minutes. Again, this isn't even the worst it goes. But 4 minutes is way too long for a stage 2 course. What I will say, though, is that once again, this time limit wasn't particularly bad for this stage 2 course. Not only down to the wire clears, but you definitely need a lot of time to get through the gauntlet that is Wingnut Alley. So honestly, I don't think that I faulted what users were thinking about at the time limit this much. I just think it's way too long for stage 2. Waking this course is definitely difficult, but I definitely am going to give it an A-rank. I think it is everything I would like about a stage 2 aside from the time limit. Everything on it aside from that is really good, and even with some of the lackluster obstacles such as the wall flip are still good choices to me. are still decent choices for me, and it's still decently fun. And very entertaining to watch. Winging Out Alley definitely helping that. Well, it's very close to an S. Again, it doesn't go above and beyond, but honestly, this course is still an entertaining watch, and I could easily even see me going higher on this if I really want to give Season 9 that spot of an S rank. But I'm not going to today, though to be fair, again, it could change. Season 10. Where do I even begin with this course? Season 10 is by far the hardest, and if it wasn't for the Season 11's was Stage 2 course. It's 2 course. I think this has everything wrong with the Stage 2 course, and this comes down to the 2 main obstacle changes for this season. Let's start with Epic Catch and Release, a supersized version of the Catch and Release from the Dallas City qualifiers. This obstacle is too long. Some ninjas would get stuck on this, and while yes, this only had 1 victim, this was still a difficult obstacle and way too hard as to start the Stage 2. At least the giant wing swing could be speedy if you knew what you were doing, and honestly, it was still entertaining to watch. This obstacle was a slog fest, and while yes, it took out only Jake Murray, it was still a very drowsy start for this Stage 2 course. Next up, we have the Crisscross Samurai, which I have nothing to say about compared to the previous season. Then they took out the Wave Runner for the amazing beauty known as Deja Vu. And by that, I mean Stage 2's worst obstacle its worst proper obstacle. And by proper obstacle, I'm not counting the wall flip or hang slider. I mean proper obstacle that actually claims some victims. Deja Vu is the definition of an obstacle that goes on way too fucking long, both in namesake and in what you have to do in the obstacle. It was basically just unhooking a lot of bars and going around and around in a circle. The bars were connected to each other, meaning if one fell off, the other was going down with it. A lot of people couldn't save it from this point, and this obstacle would famously be the ninja killer of the season, taking out an entire 13 ninjas. That's 13 ninjas, even beating out Winging Out Alley this season. Deja Vu is definitely the worst obstacle in the 3rd place, and honestly, I don't enjoy watching it. I never liked it, even from the moment, and I've always had the opinion that this should have been in a city finals course, and definitely should not have been in here in Vegas. It really just feels unannounced and definitely misplaced compared to every other obstacle in this place, and especially compared to every other obstacle on Stage 2. Man, that was a mouthful. Awful. There weren't many changes aside from these 2. The swing circle and Winging Out Alley would remain mostly the same from the previous season. Winging Out Alley didn't take out as many people as the previous season, but that is really only because not as many ninjas this season were competing on Stage 2 or even got to the obstacle. But it was still deadly, and only 3 ninjas would complete it, similar to last season. And the only ninja to end up getting their revenge on this obstacle would end up being Drew Dressel. Finally, we have the water walls. I don't have positive opinions about this obstacle, to put it bluntly. I just think it's way too long and kind of time taxing. It's really weird to say. This obstacle would go on to Eternity W11, but ended up shining a lot more. But honestly, this just felt like a very shameless gimmick by putting the competitors underwater. In the ending of the episode this appeared in, it was very obvious that this is the theme they were going for. Making it a big deal that the competitors were finally going underwater. To me, this meant to most, this meant nothing, as it just meant that competitors were wearing goggles on the way to the obstacle. On their way to the obstacle. You were given goggles at the beginning of it too, but it would waste time picking them up. I get it. Still, I think this was really unneeded. I think the wall flip could have stayed, or even the wall lift, because that was a better obstacle than this. And by the way, the time limit was 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Yeah, this time limit absolutely sucked. Really sucked. This is all because of the bad obstacle choices. I just don't like them. They're too hard and too time consuming, and this is the ultimate low for stage 2. Ooh, kind of. It's kind of weird. I know, weird, but this is not my least favorite stage 2, despite all my negative stuff, about all the negative stuff I have to say about it. Despite all the negative stuff I have to say about it. Definitely a E-Rank. E-Rank. Could definitely go lower, but I guess it's fine enough. Wingnut Alley is definitely an upside, but honestly, too many ninja... It's like Deja Vu, it basically ruins the stage for me altogether, as this obstacle makes the time limit have to be fucking 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Not much of a time limit in general. Season 11 would see a rapid change in the stage 2. In stage 2. A change for the worse, honestly. This stage 2 is quite famous for being the easiest stage 2 in history. As a record, 21 ninjas ended up completing this course. A shitload more than AW7's 8, and way too fucking much for any stage on Mount Midoriyama aside from stage 1. Let's just go down the obstacle list and I'll round back to this issue later. Giant Walk the Plank. Okay, I guess it's a fine start to stage 2. I just don't have much to say about it, and I don't really like how it's just a supersized version of a difficult qualifier obstacle. I think this was only difficult in the qualifiers because it was the second obstacle in the qualifiers. Putting it in stage 2, most competitors knew what to expect from it. Because of this, they only took out 2 ninjas, with one of those ninjas having a safety pass and completing it after that. Moving on, we've got the extension ladder, which really feels like they were running out of ideas to do with things to do with the salmon ladder. I don't really think we needed a change here. The extension ladder doesn't really have many changes. The only thing about it is that it had the same height for every rung as the final rung did in AW 4 and 5. Yeah, the rungs were just taller, and they excused that for an obstacle change. This and the next modification to the obstacle just really makes me feel like they really want a stamina ladder in here, but also really makes me feel like they're running out of ideas and things to do with the stamina ladder. And because of this, crisscross stamina ladder is obviously a lot better and still a way speedier option. Next up is Snapback. Still a difficult obstacle, and definitely way better than Deja Vu, but definitely still the worst among the other obstacles that have been here so far. I kinda think this is a good obstacle. This would be the ninja killer of the season, but it would only really take out 4 ninjas. One of those ninjas having a safety pass. Next up, we got a modified Swing Surfer. With this obstacle taking out no ninjas in the previous season, it is quite surprising to see it return. However, the dismount would be modified, as the ledges you'd be grabbing onto would be changed in favor of the ones instead of the rope. Well, this made the landing a lot more difficult, and honestly, I do definitely approve of it. I think it's fine. I definitely do approve of it. I think it's fine, honestly. And it definitely made the obstacle very difficult, as it did take out 1 ninja, Lauren Ball. Next up, we got the Grim Sweeper. Yeah, this is definitely a very disappointing obstacle compared to Wingnut Alley, and definitely a very easy one as well. This was definitely just a time waster, and while yes, I think I'm fine with it, in retrospect, I never liked this obstacle. It only took out 1 ninja, and that ninja had a safety pass, so it really didn't mean much in the grand scheme of things. Again, it just wasted time. Same with the returning water walls. Like I said before, this obstacle did get its time to shine during this season, as a lot of ninjas attempting it, but it meant that only 1 ninja, that ninja being Flip Rodriguez, ended up even failing it, and that was just because he had an injured leg going into it. The only really upside to this course is the time limit, which was thankfully lowered back down to a measly 180 seconds, or 3 minutes. This is It's the slowest time limit on a stage 2 in recent memory, but but also normally speaking, this entire course feels like an attempt to get stage 2 back into a speed course, but what it ended up turning it into as a really easy bridge to stage 3. That's how easy this course was. Only 7 ninjas ended up not moving on to stage 3. Yeah, this course was obviously getting the E rank in this category, no doubt. At least Season 10 felt manageably difficult, even if it was definitely too much. If AW10 was definitely a situation of too much, AW11 is definitely a situation of too little. With a very easy stage 2, AW13 had a lot to live up to, and I do think it did. And I do think it was able to live up to the hype. And I definitely think it was able to fix stage 2 for the most part. Leading to a lot better of a course since Season 9. Starting off, we have a new first obstacle in the Striding Steps. An obstacle that was taken from the Striding Steps challenge, that was held during the All-Stars in this spot on stage 2. This was a good choice to add, as it tripped up a lot of ninjas way out the gate, including Joe Mawowski, and it was already a good start to this more speed-based stage 2. Next up, we got a very minuscule modification to the double salmon ladder, with the top rung of each side being untopped, so that way you can easily overshoot it. This did take out a few ninjas, and I think it's fine. I don't think I have any bad things to say about this obstacle. I just think, again, it feels really uninspired, and again, it feels like they were running out of ideas on things to do with the salmon ladder. Next up, we got V-Formation, an obstacle that was initially seen during the qualifiers, and then reused on stage 2 with not much of a modification, aside from the fact that this was immediately after the double salmon ladder. I don't think I have anything wrong with this obstacle, but I just think it was a little bit time consuming for stage 2 wise. But I was generally fine with it in the grand scheme of things. It only ended up taking out one ninja, that being Enzo Wilson, but otherwise, not much to note here. I think this is a little bit sluggish for this stage 2, and it's definitely the only bad obstacle here, but it's fine enough for what it is. Next up, we got the Hammer Drop, an amazingly great modification to the swing surfer. Basically flipping the obstacle upside down. You had to latch onto a giant hammer, wrapping your legs and arms around it, and then you had to climb up to the top and make it to a rope on the other side with the same climb up as we had in AW11 Swing Surfer. This was the modification this obstacle definitely needed, as it made the obstacle a lot more difficult, and actually made the obstacle a challenge. Stronger ninjas had a more difficult time doing this obstacle, and a lot of ninjas had big saves that they ended up missing the initial grab on the holds. Some ninjas were even too small for it, such as Taiwo Yamauchi and Katie Bone in the women's competition during Season 14. The Hammer Drop was a good choice, and I love it a lot. And I really do love it for this course. Next up, we have Epic Air Surfer. Definitely one of the worst obstacles on this stage 2, and definitely second place to only V-Formation. This obstacle just feels really uninspired, and again, feels like they weren't even really trying. The obstacle did take out a few big names, but honestly, I don't have much to say about it. It's definitely a nothing obstacle for me. Finally, we have the Falling Shelves. A really good choice for this stage. I honestly love the Falling Shelves. I think it's an amazing final obstacle, and it finally fixes the final obstacle problem of it just being a time waster. You can fall in the water on here. It's down to the wire. It was definitely very intense here. The Falling Shelves had the most competitors to fall on it out of any other obstacle on stage 2, and it definitely deserved it. The final blind grab took out many veterans, including but not limited to Adam Whale, Sean Bryan, Jake Murray, and 2 up-and-coming rookies, Elijah Browning with Elijah Browning and Josiah Propel. Only 4 ninjas ended up clearing the obstacle, these being Caden Lepsek, Kyle Soderman, Austin Gray, and Vance Walker. All of them ended up making it to the buzzer as the dismount was right there. The time limit for this course also wasn't too bad. It also wasn't too bad. This being 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And it's in 30 seconds. I know I just complained about this time when we're doing AW8, but I think for this course it actually fits a lot more and feels a lot more tight. Especially so you consider when you have the falling shelves, you need at least 30 seconds in order to complete successfully. So honestly, I think it's a good change and I don't really mind it all that much. Season 13 improves on a lot from the last 2 seasons. And even seasons before that as well. To me, it definitely deserves an A rank. Just phenomenal. I love this stage 2. It just has a few downers in the world, those being V-Formation and Epic Air Surfer, that don't push it to an S rank. And the final spot for this video is AW14. Like I mentioned earlier, I am not going to be talking about AW15 Stage 2 today, for 2 reasons. It hasn't aired yet as of recording this, so to be fair, it will air soon. But also, it's a racing format version of Stage 2, meaning it is a very different course, and it would seem kind of out of place to talk about it in this video. If you want to know my opinions about this season, check out episode 68 when we talk about Stage 2's course during AW15 and our gripes and grievances with it. Alright, now let's move on to AW14 in Stage 2, the last Stage 2 we are going to be talking about in today's video. AW14 would not see much change from the previous AW13 Stage 2. However, this would definitely be a way better Stage 2 than AW13. As to fixing the 2 obstacles I was not happy with during that season. The sliding steps and double ceremony would remain the same with the previous season. However, the 3rd obstacle would be an obstacle change in the form of piston plunge. I definitely like this. I'm definitely fine with this obstacle, but it's not my favorite 3rd obstacle. I think it's fine. I think it's fine. It is the ninja, but it's fine. I don't have much to say about it. After the returning hammer drop, we have the next new obstacle, that being the Hornet's Nest, the ultimate ninja killer for this season, and basically just Wingnut Alley 2.0. I don't think I've ever talked about this, but the honeycombs from the qualifiers are definitely just the wingnuts with an added twist on it, and there's literally no reason why this couldn't just be a modified version of the wingnuts. In contrast, this obstacle isn't really all that much different compared to Wingnut Alley we've seen on stage compared to Wingnut Alley. It's basically just a revamped version with honeycombs instead of wingnuts. Because of that, it just seems kind of bigger with a lot more jumps, but it's still just as difficult. And if there was a larger field taking on this obstacle, it might have taken out more people. It's still at that problem of taking out people at the dismount, though they've found not many people end up doing that. And many ninjas end up gassing out on this obstacle too, as it was quite a long gauntlet with a lot of jumps. And different handholds to grab onto. I think it's a lot better than Epic Air Surfer and any other obstacle that was in the 5th position aside from maybe Roulette Well and the original Wingnut Alley. But it's definitely a good substitute and I still like the obstacle. After that, we have the returning final shelves, which saw no major modifications compared to the last season. However, a lot of ninjas had built their own falling shelves since the last season, so it only took out one ninja in the form of Tyler Yamauchi. Everyone else ended up clearing it, but this did not mean the falling shelves was any less of a difficult obstacle. It was still a good choice for Stage 2. As you guys just heard, my praise of AW14 Stage 2 is definitely up there, and it definitely deserves an S. It is definitely up there with NW7 as a decent mix between speed and upper body. Napoli body, and its edge over AW13 is basically just better obstacle courses, but it definitely ain't perfect. Once again, the double salmon ladder on this course is definitely uninspired. The piston plunge is not my favorite obstacle in the world, and I don't think the Hornet's Nest is the best obstacle when talking about the fifth obstacle. This is the best obstacle in the fifth position. However, I still really do like it, and I don't see anything wrong with it. And I don't see anything wrong with this stage 2, really at all. It just feels, it's just a little bit one-of-the-mill, which is AW14 in a nutshell. But honestly, I still really enjoy the stage 2 for what it is, and again, I think it stacks up fairly well to other great stage 2 courses of the time I'm along with AW13. Alright, that is the last stage 2 course I'm going to be talking about today. I'm talking about in today's video. I have 2 more things I'm going to be doing with you guys, as I did in the last video of this series. I'm going to be ranking each stage 2 course from worst to best, and then talking about my own version of stage 2, H2, if I were to redesign stage 2, H2, bringing back a whole bunch of previous obstacles from previous seasons that I feel like could easily be given a reshow. Anyway, let's get into it. Starting with my ranking from every stage 2 from worst to best. Coming in the last place is obviously season 11 stage 2. The only E rank I gave. I basically already explained why I don't like this stage 2. It's not all that hard, and many ninjas end up clearing it with no problems. I don't have much else to say about it aside from that, but it's still the same. But it's still not a good stage 2 course. And honestly, to me, it's not even fun to watch. It's not even fun to watch, aside from maybe for Rodriguez's one. And that was just because that one was really down to the wire. Next up, we got AW10 Stage 2. Not much of an improvement, and definitely still a bad Stage 2. But, like I said earlier, it's definitely too much, and compared to AW11's too little. Again, Deja Vu and Epic Release are definitely the big contenders for why the time limit is so long here, and definitely is why the time limit is too fucking much. Honestly, Deja Vu, Epic Catch and Release, and even when Alley to a certain degree, are definitely the obstacles that take this stage 2 down for me. Moving on, we got AW5 Stage 2. We have AW5 Stage 2. H2. This came down to liking to watch it, as the next entry was really close to this. But honestly, I just think this stage 2 was less entertaining to watch than the next entry in the Waking. Hang Slider, it's no different than AW4's stage 2, aside from one obstacle change that made it ultimately very much worse, and the time limit was upped for the worse. Once it was upped, and it definitely ruined the course in many aspects. I don't have much else to say about it, but it's still not the best stage 2 course in the world, but it definitely ain't the worst. Next up is AW8. This was definitely a toss-up alongside AW5. Well, yes, both courses got a C rank for me. I definitely think AW8 is way more entertaining to watch, and definitely had higher stakes. However, I definitely do like AW5 Stage 2 obstacle lineup a lot more. But to AW8's credit, again, it's a very entertaining Stage 2, as every obstacle definitely had some stakes going into it. Okay, aside from maybe the butterfly wall and the wall flip, but again, those obstacles barely matter. Again, I just think some obstacles bring it down, with mostly the down-up salmon ladder and especially the double wedge. Next up, we got AW4 Stage 2. Definitely the bog standard, and I don't really have much else to say about it. It's definitely just above average for me. And it's definitely just above average for me. But it's still fun to watch, and and I think it is better than AW5's. Is better than a lot of Stage 2 courses on this list. It being the halfway point, you can't really do much worse than it, but honestly, it's not all that good either. It depends on how you look at it. Coming in at the top 5 point of this list, we got AW6's Stage 2. We got AW6's Stage 2. Definitely improvement over AW5, and definitely a good Stage 2 course. Rope Jungle was definitely the highlight here, but this stage 2 was also just fun to watch with a lot of high stakes, and the metal spin once again being a very deadly obstacle this season. I don't have much else to say about this stage 2, but definitely still a good one, and definitely a good way to start off the top 5. Next up, this was a tough pick for me. I definitely had difficulty putting the next one on the list, but I ended up going with Season 13 Stage 2. Stage 2. As I said before, this course is really close to getting an S rank. It's really close to getting an S rank. But honestly, I don't think, and I honestly do think this course is really good. I think the striding steps are good. I think double samurai was fine. V formation's fine too. Hammer drop's amazing. Epic air safer is meh. And the following shows are definitely a good bookend to this stage. There's a lot you can go wrong with this course, and honestly, it's great. It's tough to rank this in the next entry, but I think you can understand why this is here in contrast to the next entry on this list. Coming into the top 3, we got AW9. This was definitely a toss-up between this and AW13, as I think both courses are really good, and both I gave A ranks to, and I was really close to giving S ranks to. I like both these courses a lot, and I think both of them do a lot right. I actually think AW9 does a lot wrong compared to AW13, but I also think it has a lot better obstacles in the positions. Case in point, Wingnut Alley. This basically carries the entire stage for me, and I love it. So it carries the entire stage for me, and I really do like seeing it here on stage 2. I don't think I have much else to say about this stage 2, but I really do like it. We do like it a lot, and definitely is. And that's why it's in the top 3. Coming in at number 2 is AW14. As much as surprise this might be, AW14 is definitely just AW13 Stage 2, but better. What pushes it up from AW9 is a better obstacle lineup. As aside from Piston Plunge, I really like every obstacle that's here. And even Piston Plunge is a very average obstacle. This is a very average obstacle, and a double samurai really is just there. But I really do like this stage 2. It's fun to watch. It's very intense, and has some really good obstacles for the competitors to run through. And of course, the following shows are a good choice as well. I don't think I even have many negatives about this stage 2 course. I think my only big negatives how uninspired the double samurai feels in the fact that Piston Plunge probably could have been changed out for a different, more stage 2-esque obstacle. I know my wording of stage 2-esque sounds really weird when you think about it at that point, but honestly, I still just think that Piston Plunge feels really forced, just like Deja Vu and just like V Formation. Finally, we have number 1 on this list, that being AW7. W7. This was the only other course to get an S rank, so it's probably pretty obvious this would be number 1. But this has everything I love in a stage 2. It's a speed-based course. For the last time in a while, this is a speed course first and foremost, and this stage 2 takes full advantage of that, trying its best to stall out competitors. The big thing being Roulette Woe. The big one being Roulette Woe, obviously. But still credit to every other obstacle for at least trying to stall competitors, even if they didn't take out many of them, in the case of the Butterfly Wall. I think this is a good showing for both the double samurai and unstable bridge, with these being their last seasons. And I don't really think I have much else to say aside from that. This course is just really good, and honestly, a lot of obstacles here ended up making it for me. The only really bad obstacle here, I would say, is the butterfly wall. And even then, it's just kind of there. It's just kind of there. That's all I have to say about it. Alright, so with that right there, you guys know my rankings for every stage 2. There is like AW15s. It's moving on. Moving on. What is my full layout for a fan-made stage 2 course? Well, let's hop into it. Just like last time, this stage 2 course could be literally any layout I want. Any obstacle could go in any spot on this course, as long as on this course, at least from the lineup given by the show. Without any further ado, let's get into it. This is my first stage 2 layout if I were to ever design one. Starting off with the very first obstacle, it's definitely a tough pick. There's a lot of obstacles I love to put here. The slider drop is fine, Rope Jungle's a good choice, Giant Wing Swing's definitely a fine enough choice. And the Swinging Steps is also a good choice as well. The other 3 I did not mention, I think you can understand why they weren't in. Understand why I didn't pick them, as they are the only obstacles that only stayed on for one season as well. Out of all of these, I ended up going with the Striding Steps, as I really like how it starts off stage 2. But I will say that the other obstacles I just brought up are good choices to start off the stage as well. And I would not mind a course with these instead of the Striding Steps. Even the Giant Wing Swing. To the obstacle's credit, it gets your adrenaline pumping at the start, and I think it's fine for what it is. I just think it's kind of in an awkward position. A lot of people don't like it and think it's too much, but I think it's fine. But I think it's pretty good. Moving on to the second obstacle position, given my plays, I guess you guys probably aren't surprised about putting the crisscross salmon ladder on this part of the list. Definitely, it's about putting the crisscross salmon ladder on this part of the stage. I don't think I have much else to say. I just think it's the most speedy version of the salmon ladder and definitely feels the most different. Moving on, we have the third obstacle, which is pretty obviously going to be the wave runner for me. It's really the only third obstacle I particularly like, because I do think it's just a wee bland unstable bridge done right. I like done right. It's done right. I don't have much else to say about it, but it's definitely a difficult obstacle and a good choice as well. Next up, we have Halo Drop from Season 13 and 14. I think it was pretty obvious that this would go here. I really do enjoy I definitely do like it a lot. I don't have much else to say about it. I just think it goes a lot better in this spot than than any of the other obstacles that went in this spot previously. Next up, we got a tough toss-up. And it's definitely between the Hornet's Nest and Wingnut Alley. 2 obstacles for this one, though the Metal Spin could easily go here too. But both the Wingnut Alley and Hornet's Nest are basically the same obstacle. This came down to which obstacle I liked more, and I definitely liked Wingnut Alley a lot more than the Hornet's Nest. But to Hornet's Nest credit, is definitely a close second, and if I'm being perfectly honest, with my choice for the final obstacle, I wouldn't be surprised if Wingnut Alley was just going to be deemed too difficult for this obstacle's position. It's not like this stage 2 would be impossible, just given Wingnut Alley's knockout weight during Season 9, I wouldn't be surprised if that was definitely the case. If it were me, I would put Wingnut Alley here, but I can see why Hornet's Nest would go here as well. Woodnut was also a good choice as well, same with the Metal Spin, but there was a lot of choices here. Finally, we have the Falling Shelves as the final obstacle. I think this was pretty obvious, but honestly, I like this obstacle a lot more than any other obstacle we've seen. I just like the idea of you being able to fail on it. That's all. The timing for this stage was initially difficult for me to decide. However, given in this stage 2, I would probably give it an equal 3 minutes. I don't think it's a perfect time for stage 2. H2, but it's at least a difficult balance given some of the long obstacles here, particularly Wingnut Alley. But these obstacles are still speedy, and I don't think the stage 2 is all that bad in the grand scheme of things. I definitely do think this time limit might be able to go lower, but I'm being kind of generous as, again, Wingnut Alley and falling shelves take a lot of time. So I'm mostly just trying to account for that. Maybe it should be higher. It should be higher given both those obstacles, but that's where I'm standing right now. I also don't really want it to be all that much higher. Maybe an extra 10 seconds. But again, there's a barrier. It's definitely aligned with Stage 2's time limit, so it's difficult to decide for me. Alright, that's my opinions on Stage 2. All in one video. Man, this was long and difficult to record. This recording is an hour and a half long, people. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Just like the last video, the final thing I'm going to leave you guys is a link in the description to a one of my custom-made Stage 2. I don't know how I'm going to do how to piece this together. It's likely I might have to use the All-Stars or something like that in order to piece this all together. But I will definitely try my best. Anyway, I will see you guys next time for Stage 3. I hope to see you guys there whenever that ends up coming out.